of it if someone wanted to see, a copy of the whole CD. Anyway, he put me in touch with the man who was the city historian, who also was the person who had access to all the church records. And so I met this gentleman whose name was Carl Bright, and he went with me to the offices of the Evangelical, Protestant, or Lutheran church that was in Westerberg. It was established there in about 1640, and so the records only date back to that point in time. And we went through, there were two books, starting in 1640, and the next one started in about 1700. And they were about this size. And they were separated out so that all the births were in one section, consecutively by month, and then all of the deaths were in another section, and all of the marriages were in another section. And he went through with me, and we looked for first we looked for the first ancestor we could find, and we were able to go back one more generation. So if you look at this chart, you'll see the first person on there is Adam, and it's not Adam and Eve. It was an Adam Seacat, and he must have been born somewhere around 1610 to 1620, because his first child was born in 1643. So depending on how old he was when he got married, it would be something like that. And he had, his first son was Johann Ludwig, and he was our ancestor. And so from that family we found 5 of the 7 children. There were 2 more children who were born in 1555 and 1556, and I didn't realize there were 2 more when we were there, so we didn't look for them. And then we were able to look for each of the families and siblings of the children that were related ancestors of our family. So they're the ones that you might have noticed on this chart. And you can't read the names from back there, but the beige was Adam, and then the pinks were the siblings of Johann Ludwig, and then the bright blue were his children, and our ancestor there was Johann Adam. And then the green right here, these green ones, Peter, wait a minute, we go down here to Johann George, and we go over here to George Philip, who was our ancestor. And our Peter is this first gray one right here. The ancestors of the 2 families that I met over in Germany are these 2 gray persons here who were first cousins of our Peter. And so the people that I met were descendants of Peter's cousins. And this was Johann George, and he had a son by his first wife who apparently died, and then this was his son by his second wife. And so these 2 are the ancestors of the 2 families that I actually visited with and spent time with. Gunther, who lives still in Westerberg, is a descendant of the second wife. And then the other family that I met, and I found them through the internet, who live in Erlangen, they're descendants of the first son from the first wife. And so anyway, that was a real thrill for me to be able to find out that information. I have some other information that leads us to believe that the origin of the name was the city from which the first Seacat who went to Westerberg had arrived from. And I found that in a couple of places. One was a letter that was in response to a letter that I'd written to someone living in Koblenz who also had the Seekatz last name. And you have in your booklet a copy of his letter right here. And about the first paragraph is written in German, says that it seems that the name Seekatz actually came from someone who came to Westerberg about the time of the 30 Years' War, but we found out they arrived there before that. And that it Johann did Seekatz. And this article that you have here, another person in Germany to whom I've written, sent me some old newspaper articles, and in this one, in the first paragraph, in the first column, it says that there were some records in Wiesbaden, which was the center at that time for any of their legal actions, that said that someone had filed a lawsuit, a claim against Johann Seekatz about some property that there was a dispute over. And 2 years later, there was another little legal action again by another person about some property, and the name was spelled Seekatz. And according to the person who wrote to me from Poland, he said that the name was Christianized to change it from the sort of pagan name of being where you came from to reflect a surname, and that it was Christianized sometime in the 1600s. But in this case, it was probably two generations before, or at least one generation before the 30 Years' War. So that's kind of what we know about the name. Another interesting piece of information I found out, and it's in this article, it's near the end of the first paragraph. It says that the next record in which they found out something was written about Seekatz was a very sad and tragic entry, that there were 2 women who were married to Seekatz who were tried and convicted and either hanged or burned as witches for witchcraft. And it said one of them was the wife of Adam. And when I sat down with the church historian, the city historian, and I said, I'm wondering, because we found out that this Adam was our ancestor, I'm wondering if that was his wife. And he said, well, I don't know, but he said, we did the city history, we did the history, and he said we have a whole table of the women, and actually there were 2 men, who were tried and convicted for some kind of witchcraft. And he pulls out this book, which I bought later on at a bookstore, that had that table in it listing all of the trials that took place over about a 40-year period. And lo and behold, it was this Adam, who had 7 children, whose wife had 7 children at the time that he and his wife had 7 children at the time that she was executed. And the birth dates correspond exactly to the children of the Adam that was in our family. So we don't know what she did. I asked him, what sort of things might it have been, and he said people were very superstitious, and if someone's cow died, or someone had a child who was stillborn, or something, just some kind of calamity took place that they needed to find someone to blame it on, and that was more or less what they did. I looked on the internet to find out what else was written about witches, and they call them hexens. And there were a couple of articles on there saying that sometimes when someone in the city wanted to take the property of someone who had a good piece of property, that they found something to accuse them of, and they did it for that purpose. And I noticed on that, you have a copy of the table here in the book. I noticed there that the last 2 people who were tried and convicted were men. I think the rest of them pretty much were women. So I'm not sure. And obviously, we don't know what the charges were. But if you happen to have this booklet and you look in February of 1660, it says Anna Elizabeth Frau of Adam Seacat. And that she had 7 children, and it listed these for 100 children. hard to tell whether or not we were brother and sister. We looked a good bit alike. His daughter doesn't look too different from my own daughter. I raised a picture of her, but you felt like you were with family. You really did. And the family that lived in the South, I met all of the living brothers and sisters there. They got them all together, and we spent 4 or 5 hours visiting. And they were just, it was like kinfolk, and they'd write back and forth to me now and call me cousin, and it felt good. I really, really enjoyed it. What I did in this booklet, someone asked me about this chart, and I said you actually have the information in here. If you look in the first section, after the letter, where you see the real bold print, those are the people who are living in Germany right now, and you can see how they fit into our family picture. And on page 2, the other group that I met and verified how they fit also are here. So you can see how they fit into our family constellation. I did meet the man who owned the bakery. There's some pictures back of the little bakery. The last few weeks that I was there, my other daughter came over and met me, and we went back to the town and visited again, and I was able to talk to the man who owned the bakery. And he said he's second or third cousin to this man, but he told me he had his family genealogy, and that the next time I came that he would give it to me, and we'd get together. So we'll check him out and see where he fits into it as well. Most of the people over there weren't nearly as interested in genealogy as we are, as I am, some of us. But in most cases, someone in their family who was an adult during World War II had to get a genealogy that went back 5 generations to prove that they were of Aryan descent and that there was no Jewish ancestry anywhere. And so both of these families had their genealogies that went back to the 1700s. And that's how we were able to make the connection. And they gave me copies, and I have copies of that information. Like I said, it was a dream come true to go over and find out more about our family and our heritage. Originally, a lot of the Seakats who were in Westerberg were involved in bakery, and the other 2 articles that I received talked a lot about the fact that they were merchants in the town or that they were bakers. And there is another immigrant who came to this country in the 1840s who is a descendant of one of their family of bakers who came to Iowa, and we've sort of been able to establish connections there. There are probably 100 or more Seakats in this country who spell their name in the old original way. And chances are somehow they're related as well. So that's really interesting. The other thing I want to mention to you that you have in this booklet is you now have some information about the descendants of Margaret, who was the first daughter of the first Peter who came to this country, not the Margaret that would be a niece who's the ancestor of the Ivan and Delbert, Brian. I left our genealogy book in Croydon the day that we were there, the day that we left in their historical society, and by the time we got back to Arizona, I had an email from a descendant of Margaret who had been there within about 2 hours and picked it up and found it, and he said, I'm real interested in this, and we were there checking it out, and so he sent me information about her descendants. And so you have that now in here. And then there's another branch of Seekatz that lives in Marion, and the man's name was spelled S-E-A-C-O-T-T. And I've written to him before the last reunion and said, we suspect that you might be a relative, but I wonder if you know anything about your heritage. And he wrote back and said he knew there were Seakats that lived in nearby, but he didn't think they were any relation to them. And about a month or so later, I got a letter from his cousin's wife, and their name was Ferguson, and she said, that's all there, plus all the new information that I have for this year about your family, my family. And everything that was new this year, I put in bold print. So when you go through and look at something, if you see bold print in there, it means it was brand new information. As I've given out booklets, I tried to catch you and say, I really need this or whatever. And if you look at your family information, if you see there are any mistakes, or you see that there's anything missing, please let me know and I'll correct it. If you have an email, or someone in your family does, my email address is on here. My mailing address is on here as well. I'm also trying to collect all of the mailing addresses of all of the children and grandchildren so that we have a database of all of that that's pretty much up to date. The genealogy program that I use actually has a field that I can put all that in there, and then it's connected to the person so that you don't have to figure out who is this and where do they fit in the whole family constellation. So I would appreciate getting mailing addresses and email addresses if they have them, and we can keep in touch and we can facilitate getting some more information. Janet asked me if I'd taken pictures of the records in those old church history books, and I said no, I didn't even think of it. I just wrote down the dates as he found it for me, and we double-checked everything. But then I went back to our Mormon church in Mesa, Arizona, and I requested the tapes, because they actually have films of all of the pictures of the pages in this book, and they sent it to me, and I printed out, and some of you may have seen some of these. This was the birth of Peter's father. This was the page with the record of his birth, and there was another page that I printed out that was the record of the marriage of his mother and father. And actually, when I was in Mesa, I found all of our direct line ancestors, the pages with their information on, that I was in a hurry, and I didn't write on the back of each page who it was that it was supposed to be. So when I started looking at them after we got on the road to put them in folders, I couldn't read the writing, and I couldn't tell exactly who it was. So I only have Johann Ludwig's birth, and I have the birth of Peter's father, and I have the marriage of his mother and father on these copies. I guess that's all those little booklets Gunther gave me. It's all about Vetterberg and the area and the flora, the fauna, the art, the crafts, the law, the people, and so forth. And I haven't read them all because my brain is not that good. But I looked at some of them that had topics that I was interested in, and I can do all that. That's kind of anybody wants to go to Germany next year, send me an email, and I'll let you know when I'm going to be there.
Not flying concourse. Yeah. There'll be an envelope out here on that table right by the door whenever you need wants to donate. It basically was posted. It's quite a bit for all the mailing to do, so anything you want to donate to that. We haven't got an official system set up to collect money for it, so for now that's all we're still doing. Donate whatever you want and stick it in that envelope, and that'll help them on postage. Oh yeah, speaking of next year, you're supposed to cover that. It's the first time I've ever done this, so I'm getting everything behind. I guess tentatively it's set up for the end of July again. I think maybe it's quickly having in Kansas one weekend and in Indiana another, so between the two, that's something to get it. Come to one of them, but I'll let the farm say, I think, maybe if it ends up the end of July, this particular, there's something else.
I checked on, at Best Western, checked the Best Western hotel card for the last Saturday of July, which is July the 28th. It said, still was available at that time for reserve for the banquet during that time. Now, there's automobile Silent minutes. Well, okay, now, well, I guess probably next year will probably the same problem. First Saturday in August, that's what it actually is. Now, you said there was conflicts here with people. The last day of there were conflicts here with the last Saturday in July.
A lot of people are doing things. Might be the same thing first weekend in August, but a lot of people, I think it's going on in July.
Yeah.
But if they're already filled,
Well, that's, I don't know for sure, and they had a specific reason for it, period, it was on the August. Well, I don't, as far as conflict, back people back there, I don't, if it would be attending a reunion, I don't know if that will make any difference. I guess some people back there, we, Vera had some problem there, but so the next Saturday,